Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Morning Shot.
Welcome to Morning Shot with Audrey Seek and Ryan Huang. And we're starting to unpack the first day of debates in Singapore's 15th Parliament, which opened yesterday. And it was a packed session. MPs tackled issues ranging from the worsening crisis in Gaza to the clampdown on vaping to the reliability of our train services.
And that's only the start of a week-long debate that will also scrutinize ministry plans on housing, the economy, and climate adaptation. And to help us unpack the key takeaways from the opening session and what to look out for in the days ahead, we are joined by Nicholas Fang. He's the Managing Director of Backdot. Good morning, Nicholas.
I thought you were going to say the lovely Nicholas Fang. I thought that was the plan,
I was so tempted to.
Well, it was lovely for you to join us here today. Always great to chat with you, Nicholas. So let's start with a broad view of day one of Parliament. We saw a wide range of issues debated, from Gaza to vaping and MRT disruptions. In your eyes, what stood out the most, and what does it tell us about the government's priorities, heading into this new term?
Right. So I think for sure the reason why I guess people should be interested in what happens in Parliament is, as you say, a signal or a sign for people as to what the government's national priorities are going to be, what their focus is going to be on. So it was an interesting and a pretty long session that we had yesterday. It's now the largest Parliament on record in Singapore's history. We've got the largest number of first-term MPs, which contributed to the record size of Parliament. So it was interesting, I think, for a start to see some of the new faces. We were just saying kind of off air that, you see some people that you go, oh, who is this? I don't really remember them from the GE. So it's obviously a chance for them to make their mark, to sort of contribute to the discussion. And also for the new political office holders, the POHs, to come out as well. We heard, and I'm sure we'll discuss, Acting Transport Minister Jeffrey Xiao, and he made the point that he had to speak 3 times in the first day. And we saw Acting Minister David Neo coming out as well, and we heard from a number of new MPs too. So, I think it was good to get a sense of, I guess, presumably what's going to be the 4G team. Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, after the first election that he contested as Prime Minister, now has the team ostensibly that he's putting in place for the next few years. So I think the range of issues was very broad. There was pretty good range from the debate around the We First Society, the discussion that was first mooted by Prime Minister Lawrence at the National Day rally, that President Tharman sort of took up in his president's address at the opening of Parliament a couple of weeks ago. So my big question about that is how do you create a We First society? It's something that the leader of the opposition, Pritam Singh, said it's not new, this communitarian approach. I agree. But the critical thing is, how do you actually incentivize society to shift? How do we see behaviors change, mindsets change, to put we before me? I think we heard a lot more yesterday about what a We First society would look like. We heard some debate about whether a We First means the diminishing of the individual. Pritam again saying that we shouldn't lose the individual spark, the kind of creativity and innovation that comes from more individual-driven approach. But I'm still waiting to see how are we going to effect a We First society. And then, of course, we spoke about everything from Gaza down to very specific granular issues as well. So I think we've got a sense of where the emphasis is going to be. Vapes, obviously, still a very big issue for Singapore, dominating a fair bit of the discussion yesterday. But I think we're just at the start. So I think for the rest of this week and potentially the rest of the year ahead, we'll start to see more of the approaches from the different sides, the opposition MPs as well as the incumbent party. So interesting start, I thought.
Yeah. I think day one, to your point, really setting a tone and giving a sense of what are the hot issues that people care about high on the agenda. Among them, you mentioned Gaza. So Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan said Singapore's position is not if, but when to recognize a Palestinian state. What do you make of his calibrated stance, especially when more countries are moving towards immediate recognition?
I think it's a shift for sure, right? I think the previous comment from the Foreign Affairs Ministry was that Singapore is prepared in principle to recognize the Palestinian state. Yesterday it was quite definitive. It's a question of time, but it's also a question of conditions, which I think a lot of countries in the world are also holding to, this idea of what are you actually recognizing if you recognize now? Is there a defined territory? Is there a consistent population? Is there an administration that can engage with foreign parties if you recognize them? I think for a lot of these questions, the answer is still no when it comes to the potential state of Palestine. But I think that it is a reflection of how much this issue actually weighs on the minds of Singaporeans, that a number of MPs and the minister had to speak a couple of times, and other ministers from Foreign Affairs Ministry also making comments. I think it is a reflection of how serious Singaporeans are taking this situation. Minister Balakrishnan also talked about sanctions on some individuals who were, I think, pursuing a very aggressive settlement strategy or very aggressive behavior in the West Bank and Gaza. So I think we'll wait to see what those sanctions actually mean. I'm going to guess that the physical, practical impact isn't going to be huge, but it will be a statement on the part of Singapore.
Yeah, so how significant was this step, to signal Singapore's position and in terms of real-world impact as well?
So I think it's very important. I know that there's views that potentially Singapore could be a bit more affirmative and maybe follow Canada, Australia, the UK, France in recognizing right now the state of Palestine. But I think one of the very key roles that Singapore has always played in international diplomacy is that of a neutral but trusted broker between different sides. We've played that role between China and Taiwan in the past. We hosted the Kim-Trump summit historically in 2018. And I think that what Minister Balakrishnan said yesterday was to try to bring that out a little bit. The fact that we have a relationship with Israel, we have a ability to speak to them, but at the same time we're also very supportive of efforts to try to bring the Palestinian people and potentially a Palestinian state forward. I think Minister Balakrishnan shared some of the measures, the scholarships, the civil service training that we provide. So being able to have a conversation with both sides, I think, it's always been Singapore's way in terms of being able to bridge between opposing sides on the international scene. And I think this is just another example of how we do it. Again, Audrey, to your point, should we have done more? I think there will always be people on both sides of the debate. But I think what the minister shared yesterday was very consistent in Singapore's traditional historical approach.
Yeah, another hot issue closer to home is what's playing out on the transport front, and that's where Acting Transport Minister Jeffrey Seah was pretty busy yesterday. And he talked about how commuters should receive more accurate and centralized information during disruptions. How important is this focus on better communication for maintaining public confidence, and how far does communication go in addressing frustrations when breakdowns occur?
Yeah, I wonder whether he questioned his life choice about entering politics at this phase, because he's been pretty busy, as you say, since the election and since he was appointed as acting minister for transport, with a number of breakdowns and rail disruptions. He did make the point that when compared to the same period last year, the difference is potentially incremental, but he did acknowledge that there seemed to be quite a stronger public response today in view of the current disruptions. And he said that potentially that was because the impact was felt more broadly. Maybe more people were affected by the disruptions. So, Ryan, to your question, I think it is definitely an issue of communication. People would very much like to know as far in advance so they can plan their day and not be too severely affected. But I think there are broader questions that we saw in a number of questions in Parliament about where is taxpayers' monies being funneled to? Why are we seeing these situations? Is it an infrastructure, a structural issue? Is it an equipment issue? Is it wear and tear over time? That's something that we should expect. And more importantly, what should we expect going forward? Is this going to be the norm? There is always historically a lot of conversation about how Singapore's system compares with Hong Kong, with New York, with London. And I was in the UK a couple of weeks ago, and, it's in the midst of, in that case, the rail strike. And that kind of disruption that happened was significant. But people over there are kind of used to it.
Yeah.
They're just like, we get on with life. Oh, can't take the train, get out, take a bus, walk, take a taxi or whatever. And it's sort of a national psyche that is just a little bit more resilient to this. I guess from Singapore point of view, we're very used to a very efficient transport system, so maybe our standards and our demands are a little bit higher. But communication, I think, is coming back to the question, is critical, not just in terms of the practical information to help people get on with their days when things do happen, but also what is being done, why potentially are we seeing some of these things, and then more importantly, what we can expect going forward. Do we not need to start planning a little bit more? And of course, this has a flow-on effect to the other question, which is about car ownership and COEs, right? Because one of the sort of rebuttals towards COE system change is that actually our public transport system is very good. So, people do have options between buying and owning cars and that. So definitely people want to know, is the public transport, is the train system still going to be, performing at the standards that we've come to expect?
Yeah, but the thing is, Nicholas, you have lived abroad and I have as well. Singapore's MRT system really is one of the world's most reliable. And Minister Xiao did talk about that as well, but we can't expect zero interruptions at all times. But now moving to COE, this has been a big issue the last couple of weeks. Of course, we did see COE prices jump significantly just this past time. And Workers' Party MP Jamus Lim suggested COE discounts for groups like large families and caregivers, the disabled. What do you make of this kind of idea? How feasible is it in Singapore's context?
I think in this particular case, I listened quite intently to Minister Jeffrey Xiao's response. His third of the day, and it was the last response before they called a halt to the proceedings yesterday. And, I have to agree with the point that he made, which is that when you start to try to adjudicate and say, some people should be treated preferentially, nobody, I think, disagrees with the fact that, people who have young children or who are caregivers potentially would need a car more than somebody else. But when it comes down to the brass tacks, to the nuts and bolts of trying to figure out how much is enough, what situation, how old are the children, what happens to the benefits after you extend them and then they're not needed anymore, maybe the children have grown up. And I have to agree with the minister's point, which is that, it's very, very hard to come down with a framework, with standards that everybody agrees to, that everybody appreciates. So I think his default is that the system that we have now may not be perfect, but it's probably the easiest for people to understand. They may not like it, but they understand it and they get it. And I liked his point, which was that if you try to tweak it too much and put in place too many of these different standards, then we'll probably spend more time in Parliament debating why is this standard here, why is it like this, and stuff like that. Yeah. So not a perfect system, but it's probably the best and the most effective, efficient one that we can have today.
Yeah, not easy to draw the lines. There will always be someone on the other side of the line. So we talked about COEs, you talked about Gaza. We also had in Parliament yesterday Kpods as well. What will you be watching out for in the coming days? And what should Singaporeans pay attention to as MPs continue to scrutinize the government's plans?
I think we'll still see a good blend of big picture macro issues, international diplomacy, international affairs, geopolitical developments, trade, tariffs, protectionism. I think that's going to be a hot button issue going forward. But we will see a good blend of these more granular issues that affect Singapore on a day-to-day basis. I hate using the cliche bread and butter issues, but inevitably those will come out. One thing that I did notice, though, and speaking with some of my friends in Parliament yesterday, was that they felt that it had seemed to be quite a very civil debate between the opposition and the incumbent ruling party MPs and the government. And I think that some people were bracing, given the larger number of opposition MPs, for more, jibes and barbs and pointed attacks within the House. And it seemed pretty peaceful, friendly and civil yesterday. So I think the speakers and Prime Minister Lawrence Wong and a number of people have made the point that, they do expect that with a larger number of MPs for proceedings to go on, they encourage everybody to be concise, to be clear in their representations, and not to engage in too much political grandstanding in Parliament. The aim is, of course, to serve Singapore and Singaporeans. So I'm waiting to see whether that persists. Right? I think inevitably politics is politics, and we will potentially see a little bit of more heated debates. But yesterday it was a very serene start, I felt. It was long. It ended pretty late at about 8:30 yesterday. yesterday after starting at 11:30. And from my time as a nominated MP, the sessions are much longer these days. So let's see whether that persists, and we've got a week ahead of us and a long term ahead as well. So it'll be fun, I think, to keep an eye on these things.
Yeah, lots to talk about, and only day one, so Singaporeans will be watching closely to see how the government balances ambition with practicality. Of course, big thanks to Nicholas Fang, Managing Director at Black Dot. We're grateful for your insights and for such a thorough breakdown of day one, and we'll check in with you again soon, I'm sure.
Great to see you guys. Thank you for having me.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.